So we had a race in Detroit this past weekend, the seventh race on the IndyCar schedule. 5 of the last 6 races being dominated and won by Alex Palou. But finally, we had a little bit of variety in this race, as I feel like for the track itself, while not my favorite, it was a pretty entertaining day to say the least, and one of the most entertaining races we've seen on the calendar this year. And finally, for the first time since Long Beach, we finally have a different winner that's not named Alex Palou, so I feel like we had a lot to get into. The track itself having really tight turns while also having these really fast straightaways. Not a lot of room for error there, as we saw quite a few drivers going into the runoff during practice and qualifying. A pretty interesting practice and qualifying, as we had the incident between Will Power and Kyle Kirkwood. Power just going in the back of Kyle Kirkwood and just pushing him through the turn. Absolutely crazy. And then two just laughing it off. Obviously not as funny for Kyle Kirkwood and that team. They had to do some work on the car afterwards. But just an interesting situation. I felt like got a little bit blown out of proportion. No penalty was taken, which I thought was really interesting, but it's practice, so I feel like those two are kind of weighed a little bit differently. So for myself, it was pretty funny. I could see the danger of the situation, but also it wasn't that crazy. So just interesting situation. It was really setting up a lot for the race. Will Power might be the best nickname I've heard in a long time, honestly, but qualifying for this was pretty much dominated by Andretti as Colton Herta gets the pole. David Malukas had himself a really good qualifying session, getting second for this race, so keeping that momentum going from the Indy 500. And Kyle Kirkwood, who just had a slight mess up, believed that he had the car to battle for pole and almost got there, but got third position. So the Andretti cars were just looking really fast heading into this. The race itself was pretty chaotic while also entertaining, I'd say, from a fan perspective. We had 10 different lead changes in this, only 5 cautions, which I feel like for this race is pretty decent. Some not so great incidents, as we'll get into later, but luckily everyone is okay from all of those incidents. But like last year for this race, we ran almost half of it under caution, which is just absolutely insane. That's why I'm not a big fan of Detroit in general. I feel like most of the races ran under caution, and we have quite a few of these like dumbass incidents, and especially just the layout of the course itself. I just feel like it's very tight in the corners and very slow. But it did bring an entertaining race, so I'm kind of eating my words a little bit on shitting on it last week, and then it provided arguably the best race of the season so far. But getting into those incidents, yeah, we had quite a few of them. Felix Rosenquist, unfortunately, being involved in 2 of those. First one just spinning out into the tire barrier. That was on like lap number 14. After that, on the restart, Scott McLaughlin, who was running really well, I feel like up until this point, I feel like he would have been a factor later in this race if it wasn't for this incident. Just getting into the back of Nolan Siegel, spinning him a little bit. It was hard to kind of see the judgment on that, seeing if Nolan possibly braked a little bit early, and Scott just getting into the back of him. So Nolan just continuing to struggle this season. And also getting into it real quick, the beef on Twitter between him and Tony Kanaan, just absolutely hysterical. The IndyCar hate cauldron should be coming back, because I feel like we are just building these beefs throughout the season, so that was just honestly funny. Some people getting really heated with that, but just I think it's hilarious overall. It's social media. People are going to argue. People get heated over these situations. It's competitive. It's racing, so it's going to happen. And the amount of cautions we had from incidents regarding tire issues. Callum Ilott had a tire issue on lap 67. I believe it was his right front, which just wasn't tightened all the way, went into the wall. RLL had just issues all day. Devlin DiFrancesco early in this race had his rear right tire just completely come off. Louis Foster had a right front suspension just completely snap, and then he went straight on the fastest part of the track, 180 miles an hour, into the runoff, hit Felix Rosenquist on the way, unfortunately just caught up in that, and just hit the tire barrier in the runoff. So that was a tough incident for both of those guys. Luckily both are okay after that. And then Graham Rahal also having issues, as he had to come back into pit lane as one of his tires was loose, and then I believe the lug nut for that got locked or damaged, so they had a tougher time getting that off. So just weird issues all around in terms of tires, especially for the whole RLL team. Just really weird to see, honestly. And I would say the most exciting part of this race and the best part of the day is after we were done with all the last pit cycles, 30 to go, we had one of the biggest incidents of the race as David Malukas gets into the back of Alex Palou, pushes him straight into the tire barrier. So Alex Palou's day was done. A slight dent in the championship, so that's going to be interesting going forward. But sucks for Alex, who was having a decent day, and also sucks for David Malukas, who was having a really good day up to that point, a good weekend overall, carrying that momentum from the Indy 500. Just a big learning moment for Dave, honestly. Really apologetic after the race, but yeah, it just sucked for him. So that meant we were finally going to have a different winner for the first time in quite a while since Kyle Kirkwood at Long Beach. So it was just going to be interesting to see who could possibly hold on to that, as Santino Ferrucci was in first, and then it was Kiffin Simpson in second, and then after that we had Marcus Armstrong in third, Kyle Kirkwood in fourth, and Will Power in fifth. But the interesting situation there was the top three had more worn tires, but they had fuel to go the rest of the way, so it was interesting to see if those guys were going to be able to hold on. And then for Kyle Kirkwood, Will Power, and then it was Colton Herta behind them, they had fresher tires, so they were going to be on the tack going into this final restart. And then it was just getting really interesting as Kyle Kirkwood just looked determined, man. He was just getting the jump, especially on these restarts. He was just really fast. Marcus Armstrong on the opposite end of this, I noticed throughout this race, dude was just not getting these restarts down, so I don't know what was going on there, but got jumped really early. He was going quick for Kiffin Simpson for second, but we had an incident as Kyle Kirkwood, his left wing makes contact with Kiffin Simpson's right back tire. So slight damage to that wing. It was going to be interesting to see going the rest of the way if there was going to be any shifts, if he was possibly going to have to come in for that damage. Pretty much just held on for the rest of the race, which is absolutely insane. I don't know if there was a lot affected from that, but Kyle Kirkwood just looked determined, man. The dude was fast as hell all weekend and was just looking really good in this race, so he was pretty much just running away with it after that. Also, that move he made on Santino Ferrucci going in the inside and then the outside heading into turn one, that move was awesome, man. Moment of the race right there. Great overtake, but Santino Ferrucci, I feel like, also had some really good racing moments as well. That overtake onto Will Power on the inside, also in turn number one, I believe. Was able to get second position for that, but we'll go into what happened later. It looked like Santino Ferrucci was having a career day, but getting into that in a bit. It was a really good battle, though, towards the finish. Kyle Kirkwood was pretty much just running away with it, but we still had these further battles, which is the thing I love about IndyCar. It's not all just about first place. The podium matters a lot, especially as you're just looking for more and more points, battling for every position that you possibly can. Will Power tried to hold on to second, but just didn't really have it, didn't have the car on the day. Got jumped by Santino Ferrucci, who made a great move, and then Colton Herta and Will Power had just had a great battle for a while. Brake lockups, big moves, trying for the overtakes. Colton Herta able to get him, I believe, in turn number 8, and was able to hold on to third and get himself a podium. So unfortunately couldn't get himself a win, was able to get pole for the race, but managed to get a podium, so still a really good day for Colton Herta. But just that Andretti team in general, man. Marcus Ericsson had a decent day, but for Colton Herta and Kyle Kirkwood, that team just excelled all weekend. They've looked really good on these street circuits, especially Kyle Kirkwood, who's just been dominant on these street circuits. Just had a really good weekend overall. So yeah, real quick, also just going over the results of the day from the back of the field going up. Rinus VeeKay, unfortunately, just out early with the mechanical issue. I feel like it's just, man, that guy's luck just sucks right now. Can we start a GoFundMe to get Rinus some better equipment over at Dale Coyne, please? Callum Milot in 26th, Alex Blow 25th, Christian Rasmussen in 24th because of a mechanical issue, Declan DiFrancesco in 23rd, Louis Foster 22nd, Felix Rosenquist, just unlucky day overall, 21st. Graham Rahal in 20th after suffering that incident earlier in the race. Sucks to see for Graham, who was running decent. Nolan Siegel in 19th, Jacob Abel in 18th, who had himself a decent day. Like I said, nice bounce back for Abel after the Indy 500. Connor Daly in 17th, Robert Schwartzman in 16th, Stingray Robb in 15th, David Malukas after the penalty able to jump back up to 14th. Marcus Ericsson had himself kind of a quiet day for Andretti over in 13th. Scott McLaughlin in 12th after that penalty. Scott Dixon in 11th. Alexander Rossi in 10th. Joseph Newgarden in 9th. Christian Lundgaard in 8th. Pato O'Ward in 7th. Marcus Armstrong had himself kind of a quiet day, but able to bounce back into 6th. Kiffin Simpson in 5th. Will Power got 4th after kind of just trying to hold on as much as he could. Just did not have the car of the day to get a podium. And then your podium, Colton Herta 3rd, Santino Ferrucci 2nd somehow. And then Kyle Kirkwood is your race winner at Detroit. So great to see for Kyle Kirkwood. Had himself a just dominant weekend and gets another win on the season. But the post-race was interesting, as one of the big talking points was Santino Ferrucci having himself his best drive and getting 2nd. But it was found that there was a penalty for the AJ Foyt team, as that car was one 1.8 pounds underweight in its ballast box, and the car itself was 10 pounds underweight. So yeah, I got a fine, got some championship points deducted, but was able to hold on to his position, which was interesting. And I'm just going to say I disagree with that. I think Santino Ferrucci should have been dropped to the back of the field. I think you need to build consistency in IndyCar with its rules. If you break these rules, you should be dropped to the back of the field. That's how I feel. You shouldn't be able to keep your position on the day just because it's a different race. It's not the Indy 500. I get Detroit is nowhere close to as big as the Indy 500, but I think we need to keep it consistent across all the races in the schedule. If you break a rule like this, you drop to the back of the field. You don't get to keep your position. It's a different look if you look at it now. You could say, hey, man, that car was underweight. Of course it was going to get itself to a podium position. I mean, he made a lot of moves in this race, which kind of sucks for Santino Ferrucci. Had himself a great day, was the biggest mover in this race, jumped 19 positions. But now it just feels like, you had this behind it, so it's almost an asterisk situation once again. So yeah, I don't believe that Santino Ferrucci should have been able to keep second place for this race. I understand that he got a podium, and that was all exciting. But the car was underweight. It broke the rules. So unfortunately for that, you should be dropped to the back of the field and disqualified. I feel like we need to keep that across the board. We had that for the Indy 500, but we're not seeing it here, which I think is really weird. So I think it just goes into the further discussion that we need another body here, an independent body to cover the rules, because AJ Foyt still has that Team Penske affiliation. I know they're not Team Penske, but they're a Team Penske affiliate. So that creates a lot of weird discussions of why should he be able to keep his podium position if that car was technically caught cheating. So yeah, I don't know, man. That's really weird, but I feel like he shouldn't be able to keep it. Getting into a more positive side, some driver shout-outs on the day. First of all, Kyle Kirkwood just had himself a great day and a great weekend, so gotta shout that out. Absolutely kicked ass this weekend. Going across the board, though, Kiffin Simpson had himself a great day. This is really surprising to say, but the best Ganassi car on the day. That is crazy. Got 5th place after starting in 11th. Pato O'Ward had himself a decent day too for shitting on the track afterwards, saying it's the worst track, we need to be at Belle Isle. For someone that really dislikes this track, had himself a really good day, got 7th place after starting in 18th. Justin Newgarden also had himself a pretty good day, a quiet day, got 9th position after starting in 24th. And then Stingray Robb also had himself a decent day, started in 26th, also able to make his way up to 15th. And then also, I believe it was Jacob Abel after that, who finished in 16th, had himself a decent day. Nothing absolutely crazy, but after the blunder at the Indy 500, I feel like a good bounce back for him. But yeah, overall, I thought the race was entertaining. It was really good for a Detroit street course, one that I always felt like hasn't been that exciting, especially when it was at Belle Isle before that. But it brought an entertaining race, so I'll give it that. I was wrong about that. So keeping that momentum going forward after the Indy 500, and then we have Gateway right after that. The team's getting a well-deserved break. Yeah, I feel like that's going to be a really good race. I feel like, especially also a night race, we need way more of those, way more night races. Please, IndyCar, please give us more night races on the schedule. But yeah, that'll be really exciting, honestly. I'm going to go with David Malukas for that. Was a big favorite last year. I think he's going to be really good. One of his better tracks on the schedule. I felt like one of those AJ Ford cars was going to get their first win this season, and I think David's got it next week. 2 weeks from now. But yeah, I feel like things for IndyCar going forward are looking pretty good. I feel like the excitement is up for these races. I feel like it's not as much of I'd be interested to hear any thoughts about the Detroit weekend or just the IndyCar schedule going forward. Are we possibly going to see a dip in the championship? Are we possibly going to see a change in race winners as we are heading into the more oval heavy track part of the schedule? So that's going to be fun. I feel like it's going to mix things up a little bit as we kind of switch up throughout the rest of the schedule, and things are just looking good going forward. I'm excited to see where IndyCar heads throughout the summer and how things look. Possibly if Kyle Kirkwood can fight a little more for this championship, or if Alex Below is just going to run away with it. I really don't know at this point. Everything's pretty much just up in the air, but that's the thing I enjoy about IndyCar. I feel like it's not exactly predictable. The series itself is always exciting in terms of it can produce new results every single week, so I feel like that's just the kind of thought process to have going forward. I feel like it's in a good spot right now. I think we're having some decent races, so hopefully after the week off we have a really exciting night race at Gateway and things just look good going forward. So yeah, take it easy, take care.